What's up, guys? So Paddy's Potato Peelers has tagged me in this video for 3 pet peeves of knives. I think Blue Collar Survival started the tag, and Paddy took it upon himself to tag me in it as well. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with my biggest pet peeves when it comes to a knife, and that is going to be the plunge grind and the sharpening choil. I think they go hand in hand, though technically I guess they could be 2 separate entities, but I'm going to consider them just one. That being said, when you've got a sharpening choil or a plunge grind that is not done correctly, and you sharpen it on, say, the Edge Pro Apex, your stone can ride up against the plunge grind and create grinding patterns. You see where this shining metal is? So your stone actually rides against the plunge grind, creating just all kinds of mess. And I can tell you, I've ruined the aesthetics of plenty of knives by adding sharpening notches. This is one that just had a big wad of metal down here at the base. Absolutely ridiculous. I got this Will Moon MK10, and I actually had him cut a sharpening choil or a finger choil in for me. Even though he did that, the plunge grind still intersects right at the very base. So when I go to sharpen that, it's probably going to create a flare. And you guys have probably seen that if you've looked at any of my sharpening videos. I've talked about it, I've shown it. It's just something that comes along with the territory. Here's another one that I had to enhance. Benchmades are pretty notorious for it, but they're not the only people that have this problem. I mean, it's across the board. Microtech, Boker. I mean, everybody and their mother has the problem. I just got this knife. This is a G&G Hawk mud knife. Although the plunge grind is done fairly well, and so is the sharpening notch, there's still a ramp there. I'm not sure how well it's going to pick up, but this back edge is actually higher than the rest of the edge, creating a ramp. So when I go to sharpen this, I'm going to have to grind that down to get things to line up properly. My next 2 points are going to be a little obscure. They're not really focused directly on the knives per se. Pet peeve, I guess number 2 would be guys who are steel snobs. Now that's not to say that super steels should be frowned upon. I'm not saying that. I'm saying guys who will discount a knife in AUS 8 just because it's AUS 8. Now there's a caveat to that, and of course it's going to be price. If you got a $150 knife that's made with AUS 8, I can totally see not purchasing that knife due to the steel. But if you've got, I don't know, maybe a $30, $40 knife that's in AUS 8, you like the design of, I see no problem with picking one of those up. Especially if you sharpen. You know, edge retention to someone who can sharpen a knife, you know, is kind of silly. You can keep your knife going for as long as you need. All you need is a stone. Finally, my last point would probably be customer service. I brought these 2 Medfords in this Chris Reeve Sabenza because I want to make a point here. I had to send my Chris Reeve Sabenza in because I wanted to get the blade replaced. Now this was a $400 knife. I was told that since I had anodized the knife, being the pocket clip, and I also took some Scotch-Brite to the scales and removed that nasty anodized coating, that bead glass chalky coating that they have. Because I did those 2 things to this knife, I avoided my warranty. Now, they don't just replace the blades for free. you have to pay for it, and I believe it was like $150, somewhere in that ballpark. So I was totally going to pay to have my knife replaced, at least the blade, but they wouldn't even open the knife. They said once it's voided, they won't touch it. So I sent it out to them and they sent it right back to me. For a $400 knife, hell, for a $100 knife, especially for a company that touts how awesome their customer service is very disappointing. And I will not buy a knife based on customer service because of that. Now, Medford. This is a story in itself, so you guys bear with me. I bought this 187 flipper, and I had a ton of lock stick. I mean, you couldn't even hardly open, or rather, you couldn't even hardly close the knife because there was so much lock stick. I had emailed Greg and Amy and spoke with them, explaining the situation. Greg told me to put some pencil lead right here where the lock interfaces with the blade. And that got rid of the stick for a little bit, but then I started noticing that when I opened it, it felt like it was springing. It's hard to describe unless you've actually had one. I didn't really know what was going on. I was in contact with a few people, and they told me it sounded like my lock head came unsprung, that by pushing it over too far, I had unsprung the tension in the titanium. So I contacted Greg back, and I was still fairly new into knives at this point. Explained to him what had happened. He told me to send the knife in. I'd have to pay for shipping, and he would take a look at it. He got the knife and called me on the telephone. Through the course of the conversation, he called me a liar twice. Told me I had taken the knife apart to get better action by loosening the pivot screw. Now, they use a proprietary pivot. I don't even have a tool that can open that thing. But keep in mind, I was still fairly new to knives, so I didn't even take them apart at this time. Hell, I don't even take them apart now unless I absolutely have to. I'm not good with putting these things back together, so unless there's a real need and reason to do it, I do not take my knives apart. So he basically called me a liar 2 times and told me that he would replace the lock side, and I believe he replaced the hardware. He wanted to charge me for it, but he said this time he would go ahead and get it done based upon the fact the knife was still brand new. So had to pay for return shipping, so I had to pay $40 to ship it there and then $20 to ship it back. So I ended up coming out like $60 short to send this knife back, and it was brand new, 2 weeks old maybe. Anyway, that whole situation just left a really bad taste in my mouth for Medford, and I will not purchase another one of their products. I got this one. It's a Viper. It's a $900 knife. It's got tons of lock stick. It's got really late lock engagement. I've never taken this knife apart, but I noticed the pivot was loose. I could actually turn it with my thumb. Again, I don't have a tool to open this thing up. So what I ended up having to do was take a pair of needle nose pliers, stick in there, and twist it. Doing so, I kind of scratched it up and chipped it out a little bit. There's no way in hell I was going to send this back to Medford and go through that whole debacle. So those are my 3 pet peeves. InThePocket, he's another YouTuber. He really nailed it talking about plunge grinds and actually the main grinds of knives. I agree with all of his points. He really nailed it, so I kind of tried to rack my brain and come up with my own scenarios here. Appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, as always, leave them below. Y'all have a good one.